welcome to the stage the Honourable Mariam Monsef, Minister of International Development and Minister for Women and Gender Equality.
Good morning, Women Deliver. Bonjour, Anin, salam alaikum. C'est un grand privilège pour moi de me tenir ici sur ce territoire traditionnel Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam, et Squamish. What a great privilege it is to be in the midst of all these change makers in this important moment in our history on traditional territory that the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and the Musqueam peoples have called home for generations upon generations. Many thanks to every single one of you and your teams for being here, to my own team for rocking it, to the team at Women Deliver for the big dream and bringing us here to beautiful BC. Let us acknowledge the work of the movement that has brought us to this moment in time, a movement that has existed long before any of us got here, a movement that will continue long after we're gone, a movement that has persevered despite the pain, despite the struggles, despite the backlash, and a movement that is its strongest when we are united. And a movement that is achieving accelerated progress because we have more men with us than ever before. In my daily doings, no one shows how important it is to ensure that men are part of the work of the movement than the Prime Minister of Canada. Please welcome to the stage the Right Honourable Justin Trudeau.
Merci Mariam pour cette introduction. Tu fais un travail incroyable en tant que ministre du Développement international et ministre des Femmes et de l'égalité des genres, en aidant à faire avancer les droits des femmes et des filles ici au Canada et à travers le monde. Merci beaucoup Mariam. How about a round of applause for our incredible Mariam Monsef? It is great to be here today with so many grassroots leaders and advocates. When we look to the progress we've made on gender equality, everything from protecting the right to choose to creating more flexible parental leave, we see the story of people like you who've dedicated their lives to defending women's rights. Thank you for your work. But I know that it's not enough for me to simply stand up here and recognize your leadership. As a government, we have to stand with you as a partner and as an ally. Yesterday, at the opening of this conference, I talked about Canada's responsibility to lead, because the unfortunate truth is that we live in a world where rights are increasingly under threat. Women don't have to imagine not being able to access health care when they need it. They don't have to imagine being denied the right to choose what's best for their health and their future. For far too many people, that's the reality, and that's unacceptable. On sait que les femmes, et les femmes seulement, devraient prendre les décisions qui concernent leur corps. Lorsqu'on parle d'avortement, les femmes doivent avoir accès à des services sûrs et légaux. Pas juste parce que c'est leur droit, mais parce que les procédures non réglementées peuvent mettre leur vie en danger. Mais protéger la santé sexuelle des femmes ne se limite pas seulement au droit à l'avortement. On doit aussi être proactif pour aider les femmes et les filles à prendre des décisions saines et éclairées concernant leur corps. On doit veiller à ce qu'elles reçoivent une éducation sexuelle complète dans nos écoles. Of course, we can't talk about sexual and reproductive rights in isolation from the rest of a woman's health. Because just like there are 200 million women who don't have access to contraception every day, hundreds more die from preventable causes related to pregnancy and childbirth. So Canada is not just speaking up, we're stepping up. Today, I can announce that our government is increasing our ongoing commitment to funding for sexual and reproductive health rights and maternal, newborn, and child health. We will be raising our funding to $1.4 billion annually to support women and girls' health around the world. And with $700 million of the annual investment dedicated to sexual and reproductive health rights, we're focusing on the most neglected areas of this field. This is a game changer that will empower 18 million women and girls in developing countries by 2030. But you know, and I know, that this is not a zero-sum issue. We can help women access birth control while also investing to make sure that newborns don't become orphans. Health is health. To be frank, there are some politicians who want to drive a wedge between these two goals, to create a division where none should exist. There are politicians here in Canada who have called our government's investments exporting an ideological agenda. Well, we couldn't disagree more. This should not be a political issue. These divisions are playing out globally with devastating consequences, and women deserve better. The women who Minister Bibeau met in Cox's Bazar, who experienced unimaginable abuse and violence, deserve better. The women who Parliamentary Secretary Kara sat down with in the Philippines at a sexual health program, who are being empowered to make decisions about their own lives, deserve better. Si on veut réduire l'écart en matière de santé, on doit faire passer les femmes en premier. C'est pas le temps de faire de la politique. Je veux donc remercier tous les organismes à but non lucratif, dont 100 ONG canadiens qui se sont mobilisés pour cette cause. Notre gouvernement vous a entendu et aujourd'hui, tout votre travail porte fruit. Chaque femme, peu importe où elle vit, doit avoir accès à des soins de santé sûrs et de qualité. Here in Canada, we've made great strides over the last 50 years in expanding women's health services. But access to safe reproductive services remains uneven, even in Canada. There is still more work to do. So just a few weeks ago, Minister Petitpas-Taylor announced the lifting of restrictions for prescribing Misigay Miso, giving more women, especially in rural and remote areas, access to reproductive health options. And our government is also investing in our researchers and our nonprofit organizations, like Ovarian Cancer Canada, to support their vital work in preventing, screening, and treatment for diseases that women are facing. My friends, when we prioritize women, everyone benefits. When women are healthy, they can focus on making a positive difference in the world, whether as entrepreneurs, artists, or innovators. When girls are empowered and informed, they become leaders who lift their communities up. Aujourd'hui, grâce à un investissement annuel de 1,4 milliard de dollars dans la santé des femmes et des filles, on franchit une autre étape pour faire de cette vision une réalité. Merci beaucoup tout le monde. Thank you so much for your activism, for your strength, for your leadership. We are doing this together. Merci. Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage founder of Dollar Street and co-founder of Gapminder, Anna Rosling Runland.
Wonderful. I was afraid to actually start talking since I only have 15 minutes and I have so many things I want to say. So while they were fiddling with the computer, I didn't want my minutes to start rolling. So that's why I stood here completely quiet, even though I could have started. So that was a smart move. So thank you, everyone. It's wonderful to be here. It's an amazing thing, right? I come from the Gapminder Foundation, and we're a small nonprofit based in Sweden, and we try to fight devastating misconceptions with a fact-based worldview that everyone can understand. And for the first years, this is me, Hans, and Ola, and we were the ones starting Gapminder. And yes, I didn't put the name because it looks ridiculous. I met Ola when I was 16. Hans was my father-in-law. Unfortunately, he passed away. But this is sort of the reason why we have the same name. And we're fighting boring statistics about important things because we notice people are very hard actually digesting information that looks like this. So we tried to develop different visualization tools. We did documentaries, exercises for classrooms, but we started realizing something was wrong. So we wrote a book because we had forgotten to tell people what we thought they needed to know. And we did write it. And we started with 13 fact questions. They look a bit like the ones you got. So very briefly, this is one of the first questions. Global climate experts believe that over the next 100 years, the average temperature will get warmer, stay the same, or get colder. Get warmer would be the consensus right now, right? And the thing is here, let's go back. The thing is, people are actually usually getting this correct, right? So here's the results from the 14 countries where we were testing it. And we can see Canada, 81% of the general public we tested got it correct. Looks like a bad number because you're Canada is the lower end of the list, but still it's pretty impressive. Most people know that something is going on with the climate. It's worse with other areas. Let me show you this one. How many of the world's one-year-old children today have been vaccinated against some disease? 20, 50, or 80%? 80 is correct, it's actually 88. We rounded it downwards. And look now at the results. Not as impressive anymore. What we see here is Canada, only 15% scored correctly here. And we have Sweden, where I come from, at the top. But still, it's not very impressive. Because if we would have asked the same questions to the chimps at the zoo, 3 answering alternatives, 20, 50, or 80, they would just guess, right? Pick A, B, or C randomly. And here, this is where they would end up, by not even listening to the question. And that is a bit disturbing, I think, right? So we have asked this in several different conferences, and I'm just going to show you first a few of the results. World Health Summit, almost at chimp level. Davos, 18%. A meeting in Lindau with Nobel laureates and medical scientists. And one of the largest banks, these were the smart guys actually saying, you have to sign an NDA before because you will not be able to disclose. So It's only 4% on that bank. And you can think here, do they need to know anything about vaccination globally? Of course not, but it's important to understand that if you can vaccinate kids, you will have a cold chain, you will have infrastructure, you will have mothers who can read and write and get the kids to the right place at the right time. You need to have a lot of things actually in order, and they don't know it. So this was the result. 15% scored 0 correct, which is pretty impressive in the wrong way. And this was the rest, right? 1 got 11 correct. No one got 12. Just so you get an idea. That was the starting point of the book. And now you have had a chance to see that people usually score pretty badly. So we took the next step and we're asking you some questions about women. No pressure, right? So here, how many women in the parliaments? 12, 17, 22. We can see how the Swedish, US, and Canada general public scored first. So do you think you were better than these groups? Oh, very quiet. Yes, you were actually. You can see, here you were much better, right? So, and we can just have a quick look, because it's pretty interesting. These are all the countries of the world, and we can see how the representation of women in parliaments have increased. It's a bit of a mishmash, and it can still grow more, but something is actually going on in a positive direction. On average, 30-year-old men have spent 10 years in school. How many years have women of the same age spent in school? Yeah, 9, obviously. So, these were the audiences we tested. We have Canada down here on 20. What about you? Do you think you beat the Canadians? No, you don't. And I see some empty seats there. It was only 1,000 of you who actually answered this, so probably it was those people, right? They're not here now. So never tell anyone that you actually answered, right? Keep it as a private secret. Here we can see what has happened to women. Let's see. Here, this is the mean years in school. Let's see how it's actually increasing. You see, with more income, and you can see how the years in school is actually increasing for women. So it is a positive trend, right? And we can see here how many, in low-income countries, how many girls finish primary school, 20, 40, or 60. 60 is the correct. This is how the audiences have answered in our other poll. Canadians, at the bottom, 5% is not very impressive, I must say, but the others are not very impressive either. So what about you here? Do you think you will beat this? Yes. You do. But if you hadn't read the question, just picking A, B, or C, you would probably have come to the chimp level. So, and then we have the contraceptives. 10% actually don't have access. And here we can see only 9% picked the correct one. Birth attended by skilled health worker, 75 is the correct. Do you think you knew that? No. So now I feel like a party pooper. So, I mean, the rest of the conference will just be amazing for you, right? So many learning opportunities. So here then, men have on average gone 10 years to school, and how many years have women gone to school? 3, oh, sorry. Is it 3, 6, or 9? And it's actually 9 who is the correct answer. And this is how your results on all the questions. And if we look at your result here, this is how your results are scoring. And you can see there is room for improvement, right? You have 3 people who scored totally correct, so we congratulate them and let them lead the movement forward, right? So, and the reason why I do this is, of course, not to shame you, but we have a problem that when we think we know something, we become ignorant about our own ignorance, and we have a hard time relearning. So that's why we're sort of scratching, so you can realize that usually we're wrong about the world around us. But why are we? Because in a study, people were asked, do you think the world is getting better or worse? And look here, US, for instance, only 6% said they think the world is getting better. And when we think the world is actually getting worse. Of course, we use that when we are guessing on questions. We have an over-dramatic worldview that tend to make us guess too negative on things happening. So look quickly on some charts. Slavery has gone down. Deaths from disasters has gone down. We don't have lead in the gasoline anymore. Fewer children are dying. It's less likely to die in plane crashes. We have more movies to choose from, not to forget. More music, right? And a bigger portion of the world is protected nature. The problem is, and more kids are being immunized than in the 80s, right? Positive things are happening, but they are usually slow trends that never gets the attention. We tend to forget about it. And when we look out the window, we can't see it because there are global trends and slow trends. So we might turn to the news. And what do we see then? Disasters, wars, refugees, diseases, children suffering, women suffering, more children suffering, more women suffering, more children suffering. And of course, those things are happening and we're going to fight them. That is absolutely necessary. But it's only going to be the ordinary things we see on the news, right? But it primes our heads so that we get an over-dramatic worldview. And when we are highly engaged in something that we really feel passionate about, when we have something important we work on, like women's and children's rights and so forth, there is a huge risk that we over-dramatize the global picture, even though we have problems going on. So look here at babies per woman, what has happened over time. Let's go back. Sometimes. Here, we see back in the year 1800, we can say most women in the world, these are the countries of the world, and we can see most people actually had more than 4 kids per woman. As time is passing, we can see how the number of kids are actually getting fewer and fewer as they're becoming richer, right? You can see the trend, how it's actually dropping and changing over time for most countries. Some are doing wild stuff, but you know, the general picture. See how the world is changing. A lot of things are actually happening, and a lot of things are going in the right direction. Back in the 1800s, women usually got 6 kids, of which 4 died. You only had 2 surviving. Then you had the same amount of kids, or almost 5, and you had only 1 dying, and you could see how population were growing. And this is what we have today. The average is just above just about 2 kids per family, which is pretty amazing. And we will have a population actually slowing down. And we can see in the year 1800, we have the world population with a life expectancy below 50. And when we now look at today, we see a totally different image. Today, no country has as low life expectancy as the best country in the year 1800. So looking at this picture, this was actually in the US in 1890, when it was worse than in many places today. Here we see families from our project Dollar Street of today that we, of course, need to understand that even if they are on the same income level like the US family back in the late 1800s, they're actually having a better life expectancy, but we still have to work more. So to understand the world, we can think of it as 4 income levels. 1, this is extreme poverty you had to the left here, and this is how the world population is divided. And we have the majority in the middle. Usually we think about poor and rich, but the majority are in the middle. And this is how you get water. You still have 1 billion walking to get water. 1 billion actually having to walk if they go somewhere, having to use open fire to cook, and eating food where you're going to become malnourished, right? And sleeping on the floor with the rest of the family with no privacy, and having very simple toys to play with. So how do we now guess better than random? First of all, we will need facts and frameworks. Without that, we're going to be screwed. But then, most of all, we need to control our instincts, because our brains love over-dramatic stories. So you're going to get a very brief idea here about what we think you should do. So we developed 10 rules of thumb to actually compensate for our over-dramatic instincts. I'm going to show you a few of them. Here we have the gap instinct. Very often we hear stories about poor and rich, you know, very extreme, the outliers. We should remind ourselves then, locate the majority. To understand what is happening, you have to look at the majority, and that is usually in the middle. We hear a lot of stories about negativity. It's just getting worse. But would a positive story get publicity? Most likely not. We never see stories like that. Yesterday, all trains were on time again, right? You have never seen that. And then we have the size problem, which is basically we hear about single numbers. Here, for instance, this is a UNICEF number, a horrible number. More than 4,489 infants died in the year 2016. Horrible, horrible number. But it was worse before, and even worse in the 50s. So to understand what is happening, we cannot work with single numbers. We always have to look at it in a context, because it's really, really bad in 2016, but it is actually bad and better at the same time. We need to have these two thoughts in our mind at the same time. Generalization instinct. We need to be careful when we do groups. It's very easy for us to make the stupid groups. When we see immigrants coming, crossing the waters, risking their lives to get to better chances. Here we have a boat of refugees trying to get to shore in Europe. And we very easily think of this as a very, homogeneous group. But I read in the Spanish newspaper something that really intrigued me. This group, a bunch of people survived crossing the dangerous ocean. They actually came to Europe, to Spain's coast, and ended up here, at the nudist beach at Gran Canaria in Spain. And I'm just wondering, they were actually jumping into the boat with strangers, risking their lives to cross the horrible waters that might kill them, to end up here, right? So I think as being a European, I have a lot to fight against now, because this was their first impression of what a European looks like. Pink, nude, with a hat, right? And then we have the destiny instinct. We tend to think it will always be like this. But remember, everything is always moving. Religions, cultures, countries. But it's usually happening very slow, so we tend to miss it and don't see it. And urgency instinct. When we feel passionate and engaged, we want to do big changes immediately. But there is a huge risk we make the wrong ones if we're too emotional. Take a step back, get calmer, and think and look at the data before, is my advice, because you can usually take small steps. So here are the rules of thumb. You find them in our book. And the takeaway here, if you think the 10 rules of thumb are too much to remember, the short one would be, the world is bad today. It really is, but it's better than it used to be in so many aspects. And we have to remember that, and we have to stay fact-based when we try to continue to change it. And the other one is, try to be humble and curious, because that seems to be where we humans are worst, actually, and failing the most. And it's only when we're humble and curious we can relearn and change and actually move forward and learn from each other. And use all your energy and power and good intentions and continue to do a big difference in the world. Thank you so much for having me here. Hi. So, I think, just one last note. I think we shouldn't let the world keep 1 billion people in extreme poverty having to live like this. I think that is a mission we have to remember. So, thank you.
Welcome to the stage our moderator and panel.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
You awake? Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
It is wonderful to see so many of you here this early, looking bright and cheery. My name is Aisha Sasay, and it is truly an honor to be here with you at Women Deliver for the very first time. You are all looking, as I say, bright, cheery, and optimistic. I want you to hold on to that optimism over the next hour as we take a long, hard look at the state of progress when we talk about the SDGs and specifically the gender targets. How much progress are we making towards meeting 14 of the 17 SDGs when we talk about gender? That's what we're going to be discussing over the next hour. Some of you will have seen that there was an SDG gender index released yesterday. And you may have seen the headline that was on the front page of many a website and newspaper, which basically said no country in the world is on track to meet their gender targets by the deadline of 2030. No country. So hold on to that optimism. We're going to take a long, hard look at where we're at and where we're going. Thankfully, I have an amazing panel here to help me figure this out, to give some much valued perspective. I'm going to introduce them right to left. Please give them a warm round of applause to welcome them. We've been here, Phumzile Lambo-Ngcuka, United Nations Under Secretary General, Executive Director, UN Women. You can do better than that. A louder round of applause, please. Mariam Monsef, you met her already, Minister of International Development and Minister for Women and Gender Equality, Government of Canada. Joanie Marlene Bewa, founder, Young Beninese Leaders Association and the UN Young Leader for the SDGs. Winnie Byanyima, Executive Director, Oxfam International. Ken Fraser, Chairman of the Board and CEO, Merck & Co. Incorporated. And last but not least, Peter Sands, Executive Director, the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, Tuberculosis, and Malaria. Let's jump right in. I'm going to remain standing, and you may see me wander. I haven't lost my mind. I am wandering with intent. Phumzile, to start with you. As the head of the UN Women Agency, you are fitting place to begin. You said in February 2018 that the progress towards meeting the SDGs for women and girls was, in your words, unacceptably slow. And then fast forward 16 months, we get this SDG gender index yesterday, which then goes on and says that no country is on target to meet those points that we want to see when it comes to gender. Give us a much needed perspective on where things stand now.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I just want to start by congratulating Canada for this wonderful announcement we just heard this morning. I think in the world there should be something like Prime Ministers Without Borders, so that some Prime Ministers and Presidents can be everyone's Prime Minister and President. So where we are now, sadly, the progress is slow as well as limited in scale. If there's anything you must take away from here today is the need for acceleration and for scaling up. Because the problems where in areas in which we are not performing as well as we should are not insurmountable. For instance, there are about 104 billion women and girls that live in countries that will definitely not make it in 2030, not unless something extraordinary happens. And something extraordinary can happen, so I don't want us to give up right now. Secondly, there are more than 2 billion women and girls who live in countries that can make a difference but are not trying hard enough. And some of them are countries that are, for instance, in the G7.
Yeah.
The areas that are most common for underperformance is women's leadership and participation. That is not unsolvable. Am I right or am I right? The second area is the area of ending violence against women. That is also solvable. Someone beats up a woman, and that can be stopped. We can have interventions, hard as it is, that can actually stop the beating up of women and all other forms of violence against women. And of course, the third area is economic performance and benefits for women In particular, the most pervasive one is unequal pay. You work for somebody, we know who employs you, that person has to pay you. That can be solved.
Yeah.
So, yes, we have these problems, but I would like us to really think about how we could together make the changes happen. Because if we push together, jump together on the same issues in every corner of the world, we will make a positive earthquake.
Thank you. Minister Monsef, a remarkable announcement made by Prime Minister Trudeau just a few minutes ago, 1.4 billion across 10 years for comprehensive sexual and reproductive health services. It's a remarkable moment. We should applaud that again.
Yeah.
But I do want you to put that in context for us as to what that means for Canada meeting its SDG targets.
We believe that leading by example is going to make a difference, that coming to this work with humility is really important. We still have a lot of work to do here at home, and that anchoring our progress deeply in institutions is the key to its sustainability. Now, it's important to note that the Prime Minister made an announcement this morning that makes Canada the #1 investor in comprehensive sexual rights, health rights, reproductive rights. On Sunday, I made an announcement that is investing up to $330 million in grassroots women's organizations at home and abroad, making Canada the #1 investor in women's rights organizations. And for all the ways that I will take all the love in this room and beyond, I have to say, this is because of you. This is the movement. This is the dreamers behind the Equality Fund who came to us and said, we need to finance women's organizations differently. This is the coalition behind the Thrive Agenda who said, we can do things differently. And the results are a testament to your advocacy. So one, we are working with the movement. You know the shortcuts, you know what works, you have the relationships, and you are mobilized and motivated. Two, we are planting seeds deeply within institutions. Beyond investing in women's organizations, the department responsible for women and gender equality is now a full and equal department in the Government of Canada. We are applying an intersectional gendered lens to all our decisions, including our federal budgets. And our Feminist International Assistance Policy is getting off the ground now, and it's moving forward.
Minister Monsef, not to cut you off, but I will push you on that. Will Canada meet the 2030 deadline? Will you meet the targets?
Something is in the air. Things are changing. We are working together, and everything that our government's been doing since day one has been to ensure that everyone is equal in every way, and the Sustainable Development Goals provide us a path and clear targets to get there. So if we continue building on this momentum, if we stay united, if we push back hard and loudly against the pushback, we will get there.
Okay. Kumtale, to you, what is at stake if we don't get to 2030 and meet the gender targets of 14 of the 17 SDGs?
Yeah. I do want a minister to hear an answer that says Canada will achieve parity and equal representation of women, because Canada can. You can. I know the determination and the amazing women that you have here. Also because of the strong leadership sitting next to me, amongst others. I think that, again, we can just make you a minister without borders. But so we need to in every way possible in the countries where we can make a difference to take that step. Because what is at stake is sliding back. Sliding back, that's the investment that we're making, the gains that we have made will be lost. Not unless we move dramatically forward. And we've seen that happen. What is at stake if we don't make progress is that we'll create nests of communities that are fertile for terrorism, for children to be recruited as terrorists. What is at stake is the progress that we have made in fighting poverty could slide back, and the extreme poverty that in the last 30 years we've done so much to bring down can actually come up. And what will then happen is that the next generation could be worse off than the current generation, and not under our watch. Really not under our watch. This is doable.
Thank you to you both. Thank you. I'm going to wander across the stage with intention, as I said. Coming to you, gentlemen.
Let's do this.
Because I want to start with you, Peter, and then Ken, I'll come to you, because I want to talk about health, as to pick off, I guess, what the Prime Minister had said and the major announcement he made this morning. Peter, to you, you lead the Global Fund, the leading funder of programs that fight the three biggest diseases, the most deadly, AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. What do these three diseases have to do with gender, apply a gender lens to health for women?
Well, gender inequalities are big drivers of the dynamics of AIDS, TB, and malaria. They are powerful determinants of who gets infected, who gets access to treatment, who dies. I mean, if you take AIDS for an example, AIDS is the leading cause. AIDS-related illnesses are the leading cause of death for women aged 15 to 49. And in places like sub-Saharan Africa, adolescent girls and young women are particularly vulnerable to HIV infection. Roughly speaking, they're twice as likely to get infected as adolescent boys and young men of the same age, and in some places they're up to 5 times as likely. But if you just look at it through a biomedical lens, you're kind of missing the problem. Because HIV infection is, in a way, a consequence. The underlying root causes are deep structural gender inequalities. It's gender-based violence, it's child marriage, it's educational disadvantage, it's economic disempowerment. So that if we are actually going to arrest the numbers of new infections, we have to tackle those root causes. And so we are, as the Global Fund, not just investing in sexual and reproductive health services, which obviously is part of the answer, but also in measures to keep girls at school, to tackle gender-based violence, to help young women become economically self-sustaining. Now, significant progress has been made. In the last couple of years, infection rates, HIV infection rates have come down by about 20%. But actually, if we really want to aspire to the SDG 3 goal of ending AIDS as an epidemic by 2030, that's not fast enough. Mm-hmm. We have to step up the fight, and that means scaling up, reaching more adolescent girls and young women, being more creative and innovative in the way we work with groups and the communities to address the underlying issues. So, as I say, we're making progress. We've committed, since 17, we've committed, roughly speaking, about 200 million in investing in specifically this area. But we need to do more if we want to get to where we need to get to.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you, Peter. Ken, to pick up with you, gender equality is a pressing social, moral, and economic challenge. I want the private sector perspective from you now. I mean, we've heard numbers of women adding 26% to the annual GDP, global GDP by 2025 if women were able to play the same roles and get the same level of participation as men in the labor force. A rising tide lifts all boats, as they say. From where you sit, is the private sector doing all it could to help in this fight?
Well, the answer to that question is just obviously not. Private sector has the means to do a great deal more. We talked earlier about, for example, pay inequality, which is a very important issue. I think the private sector does have a critical role to play with respect to all these issues, the health issues, the economic issues, the social issues, which I agree intersect. At our company, our primary responsibility as a company is to use cutting-edge science to invent new medicines and vaccines in areas like HIV, human papillomavirus, which is the leading cause of cervical cancer, other areas. What we need to be able to do is to work in partnership with governments, with NGOs, with civil society, in order to attack these problems in a comprehensive way. And that's what we hope to do as a company at Merck.
Why is the private sector not doing more?
Well, I think the reality of the world is that many people in the private sector believe in this ethos that private sector companies exist largely to create wealth for shareholders. I think if you look at the challenges that we have, the health challenges that we have globally, climate change, if this world is going to continue, if we're going to be kind to each other and kind to our planet, I think private sector leaders need to step up and play a more important role. And I say that particularly now because I think in countries like Canada and the US, there seems to be a little bit of a vacuum when it comes to governmental leadership.
What's your view, Peter, of the private sector and how they could work with you?
Oh, well, the Global Fund already has significant private sector involvement, both as donors to the Global Fund, but also in delivery. Indeed, we work with Merck for Mothers. We work with a whole range of different companies who have reach, who have expertise, who have ability to communicate with their customers. But they could be doing more. They could be doing more, but I don't think we should just put all the, in a sense, blame on this on the private sector. I also think we in the, certainly in the global health community, could do a better job at understanding how private sector companies work and their constraints and knowing how to work with them and get the most out of them. Now, I say that as an ex-private sector person myself. And I'm very struck by the levels of suspicion and mistrust and also just sheer lack of understanding. And I think we will not get to, suddenly SDG 3, I don't think we will achieve that unless we crack how to work better with the private sector.
Thank you. To the ladies in the middle, I'm going to find a suitable spot and I'll stand here. Winnie, let me start with you. When you take a look at the landscape as we talk about the progress towards those SDGs, where are you seeing the greatest areas of resistance? Where are you seeing the resistance? Who are the agents of resistance, if you will?
Thank you, Aisha. Before I talk about the resistance, I must also say how honored, how privileged it is to be here in this forum. I feel the power, I feel the passion, I feel the hope from the women's movements. Great. So, thank you, Women Deliver, for bringing us together. Thank you, Canada, for hosting us. And thank you for your leadership, Canada. It's amazing. Really, when you think of the pushback that is there against our rights to control our own bodies, our daughters, their right to health, their right to life, the pushback globally by the biggest and most powerful countries, Canada, you have said, no, this is wrong, and shown leadership. Like Michelle Obama said, when they went low, Canada went high. So well done, Canada, for setting the bar by putting your money there, funding women's rights organizations and funding women's health, women's right to control their bodies. This is powerful. This is great leadership. And also, let's remember, as Peter said, the issues that are keeping women down. If you go to the root causes like HIV/AIDS, like violence against women, it's in patriarchy, it's in culture, in traditions, in religions, in those informal rules that guide people's minds and justify the worst excesses against women.
When you look at the funding, we women, we are in the trenches fighting those attitudes, those customs, those beliefs, those social norms. Governments don't do that. They leave that work to us. Even their own agencies which should be doing that, like UN Women, like UNAIDS, they are the least funded in the whole UN system. So putting your money to women's organizations, to agencies that fight inequalities, discrimination, is for me the most powerful thing you have done, Canada. Thank you. So you ask, where are the barriers? We've seen progress. I call the 20th century the century of women's progress. Yes. We made it. We changed the world. I see it in my own life. My grandmother was born at the beginning of the 20th century, married at 14, widowed at 24, inherited by her stepson, abused. She fought. Her daughter, born in the 30s, my mother, became a primary school teacher, educated by French-Canadian nuns, by the way. And then she started a women's club. She fought early marriage. She fought to keep girls in school. And here I am, her daughter, at the end of 100 years, leading a women's rights organizations. Oxfam, we are women's rights. So, yeah. 100 years of progress, but barriers are there, and I'm going to mention 3, Isha. One, what Phumzile said, this power to make decisions in the home, in the community, in the world, in our countries. This power we don't have. How can we have today countries called democracies? Democracy is power of the majority, representative government. How can you call a government which has 21% women in it a democracy? How? We must change that. We must change the norm. If in the United States, 23% women are in the Congress and Senate, then it's not a democracy. If the UK, which gave us democracy in the 13th century, has only 32% women in the parliament, it's not a democracy. So we must change the norm and push against this acceptance that when women are absent in decision-making, it's okay. So that's one. And it's, again, in patriarchy, it's in the culture, it's in our traditions, it's what we believe is right. It's not right for women not to have half the say in all decision-making at every level. Second, the violence against women. We've done a lot. We've fought since Beijing. 144 countries have laws against violence against women. But impunity still abounds. And why? Why? Because it is acceptable in people's minds that you can beat up a woman, that a boy and a girl who are dating, he can use violence on her. So we have to deal with the minds, the social norms, the informal rules. Again, I repeat, it's not the duty of only us in civil society to do this. We want to see governments take this on. We want to see them fight the social norms, the patriarchy in society. So violence against women is a huge area, and I think tackling social norms is a weak link. We need to do more there. The third, and last, is in the economy. You know, we are crushed at the bottom of the economy. And why? Because governments insist on counting only the things that men do and leaving out the rest of the things that we do, women. Yes, they count growth. Growth is about what factories produce. It's about the roads that are built. It's not about the children we raise. It's not about the old people we look after. It's not about the food we cook, the shirts that we clean for men before they go to work. All this stuff we do that's called unpaid care work.
And she points at you, Ken.
Yeah, I do. Because we do a lot to get a man out there to work. But that work is not counted. So the way governments count the economy has to change. for women to have their place in the economy. Secondly, the way businesses are run. Businesses are run. They just treat women like trash, sorry to say. At the bottom of the economy, that's where women are. In Canada here, my friends in Oxfam, Canada tell me about hotel workers. A housekeeper, those women working in the hotels, carry mattresses of 100 pounds on their backs, moving them from room to room. They suffer harassment, sexual harassment in those rooms. At the end of the day, a hotel housekeeper will earn in 595 days what the CEO will earn in 1 day. What injustice. Business has to run differently. We have to have equal pay for equal work. We have to have jobs of dignity.
Yes.
Jobs of dignity. Women can't be crushed at the bottom. Our rights will never be realized until we change the business model. Sorry, Aisha. I stopped there.
It was impassioned and it needed to be said. So thank you for that, Winnie. Joannie, to bring you in from your perspective as a young leader, what's your sense in terms of the contributions being made by young people, your voices? How well are those being counted, included when it comes to governmental, non-governmental efforts in this fight for gender equality?
Thank you, Aisha. Before I start, I would like to, can you hear me?
Yes.
I would like to congratulate the government of Canada for this exceptional commitment. The world is watching Canada, the world is learning from Canada, and the world is inspired by Canada. So, une fois encore, toutes mes félicitations au gouvernement du Canada. So to answer your question, I think and I firmly believe that young people, young professionals, young advocates have a great and tremendous contribution in improving access to healthcare, women's rights, especially the gender equality arena. However, those contributions are not necessarily always integrated or translated into policy or program. Do you know that in this room only, we have plus 1,400 young people, young change makers, young innovators who are driving change in the community? Do you know that we have at least 1,400 reasons to listen to them, to build on our strength, our talent, our innovation? Do you also know that we have 1,400 reasons to powerize? Powerize, which means show power, share power, shift power from negative power to positive youth and gender-friendly power. But most importantly, from sharing to shifting, we need to shake power dynamic and structure. So these young people in this room here are making definitely positive change in the community, but I don't think these are captured the way it should be. Maybe more specifically, we know that there are so many gaps that need to be addressed, but the Women Deliver Young Leader program is one of the key, innovative, award-winning programs that is filling this gap.
And I wanted to ask you to drill down a little more on why it's not being captured. I think that's what we're interested in. Why are the contributions of young people failing to be fully integrated?
It is not captured because young people are seen most of the time as individuals to be empowered, while we are already powerful individuals. They are seen most of the time and in certain settings as individuals to be tokenized just for speaking engagement or participation. But when it comes to funding mechanism, when it comes to decision making, when it comes to having young people voices in monitoring and evaluation, when it comes to have young people and professionals sitting into boards, then we don't see them. Why? Because the potential, the expertise that we are bringing on the table are not valued the way it should be. Young people are not just advocates, but we are also bringing a certain expertise on the table. And I think that needs to be valued. And another quick point that I want to share, how are we using our power as young people? My personal experience, which is definitely different from the other people's experience, starting at 9, almost dying from an asthma attack, seeing my best friend at 12 having an abortion, and dying from it, I realized that I have a power and I can use this power. And that's why I set it up a nonprofit to raise awareness on HIV/AIDS, reproductive health, because we should not wait. We should not wait for adults. We should not wait for other people to advocate on our behalf. We need to bring our voice, our right, but most importantly, we need to tap into the innovation, the talent, the energy, and the expertise that young professionals, young women and men are bringing on the table.
Thank you. I'm going to stand on this side so that I can see the clock before someone starts yelling at me, and I'm going to break it open now. We've been in clusters, but I want to open it up so that we have a fuller conversation. And Minister Monsef, you've been getting a lot of love in here, rightly so. But I do want you to speak specifically to the issue of the United States and what we're seeing there. As we see this rolling back of abortion laws, as we see challenges made to the UN in terms of women's rights, the language being used regarding women's rights, when you look at what is happening in the US as a Minister for Gender, what goes through your mind?
In the US, even in Canada, we are seeing that questions that have been settled decades ago about the rights that we have fought hard to win and secure. It's frustrating and it's disappointing, but also it's the history of our movement. There was pushback when we got the right to vote. There was pushback when we entered the workplace, and there's pushback now as more and more of us are in positions of power and influence. So accepting that the pushback has always been there is first. Second, the proof is in the pudding. If we can show that growing the economy and advancing gender equality and protecting the environment go hand in hand, if we can show that we are creating 1 million jobs in over 3 years, we have the lowest unemployment rate we've ever had, the lowest poverty rates we've ever had, we can show that gender equality is good for the economy and bring others along with us, including those in the private sector. Where I get hope, and where I get my strength, and where I get conviction that we are on the right path, that we will achieve equality by 2030, is knowing that the power to push back is in the hands of people like those in this room. The power to push back is in the hands of the most powerful generation to have ever lived, and that is the youth here in this room and all over the world who are saying enough, who are saying we cannot afford to go back. As an elected official, as a politician, I get my political space and power from the people. And I don't take that lightly, and I'm counting on people like those in this room, like those who are watching us through live stream, to stay clear and resolute that those hard-won gains are non-negotiable, and we can only move forward and no longer back.
Phumzile, as I referenced the UN in that question, I want to ask you to weigh in there as well, as we see this strengthening of conservative forces in the US. From where you sit at the UN, what does that mean for progress when it comes to gender equality? I know that the Commission on the Status of Women was more difficult this year than it has been recently. Talk to me about the implications of what we're seeing in the US for the work you're doing.
So as the Secretary General says, we have to push back against the pushback. We just don't have an option to be inactive. Being a bystander in this era is really not an option. Actually, the majority of countries and member states of the UN actually want to do the right thing, but they are not equally active as the ones that are in the fringes that are taking us backwards. The biggest challenge we face is the silent bystanders, whose constitution, laws, and policies actually are going the right way, but the people who represent their government at a multilateral fora do not reflect and represent actively the wishes of their people. And my plea would be to people who are here, because you come from different countries, please monitor what your representatives are doing in these international bodies. Track how they vote. In terms of women's equality, etc., it always comes to a head during the Commission of the Status of Women. Pay attention to the role and the trends within those institutions and the role of your representative. There's just too many countries that are sleeping on the job. That is one of our biggest problems.
Anybody else want to weigh in on that?
Yeah.
Winnie?
I think I agree with Miriam and Phumzile, and want to add to what they've said. We have to see the root causes. Why? Why is this backlash? It's not happening as an accident. It's because women's rights, or the forces at play globally, the governments in power in many of our countries are political elites. They've captured power, and they're also economic elites. So the discourse they build around why they want to keep in power is so that they can maximize for themselves in the economy while controlling the state and making the laws that help them to maximize. So women, our rights, patriarchy serves this kind of government, of elite government. They keep women at the bottom of the economy. Women get less pay for the same work. Women have the worst jobs. They suffer the hazards at work, while they get millions at the top. Now, to stay there, to justify this, they need patriarchy. They need the social norms that justify this. So they buy in. They want culture and tradition to hold us down, to justify inequalities, to justify an economic model that works for them. Oxfam came out with a report this year that 26 people, just 26 people, almost all of them men, own as much wealth as the bottom half of humanity, 3.8 billion people at the bottom. This is hard to keep going unless you control political power and unless you can use patriarchy to keep people happy and satisfied with this kind of injustice. So I link them. I link this shareholder maximizing capitalism with patriarchy. And so the pushback is against people like us, women, people with disability, workers, all those at the bottom of the supply chains. We are pushed down. And for us, it is the culture and tradition that is the best force to keep us down. So when I look at that, I feel that we must fight back with others. As women's movements, we must join with workers, with young people whose future is lost because of the state capture. We must work with people with disabilities. We must link up our movements and fight against economic injustice.
Thank you for that. And Winnie, to that point of partnership and us working together, Ken, what about the role of men in this fight? What about the role of men and how active a role are they? I had someone laugh. How active a role are they playing? They could do more. Talk to me about others in your position, other men, and their commitment, what you see, what you hear, in terms of their commitment to this fight for gender equality.
So I would say, generally speaking, I think that there is a rising awareness of the importance of these issues among men. I have to say, I wish people did more, but I think fundamentally the issue for us today is how do we work together across all of these venues, across all the areas. I think there's some things that we haven't talked about today that I think are critically important. The first of which is we all have common goals. So that's a positive thing. But there's a huge amount of mistrust between different organizations that prevent us from actually achieving what we really need to achieve. So if I look at my own company, my colleagues, many of them men, are completely committed to addressing some of these healthcare disparities that affect women. The Merck for Mothers program is all about let's make sure that many preventable maternal deaths don't happen. The work that gets done around HPV infection, the work that gets done around new medicines for HIV, I think what we have to be able to figure out is how we can harness the power of the private sector, which I will say, I think without the private sector, it is hopeless. It is hopeless without the private sector. The question now becomes, how do we enlighten those leaders, and how do we work together so that things like the medicines and the vaccines that we develop, for example, for Ebola, are getting to the people who need them. And I want to make one more point before I cede to you. When we use the word private sector, I think most people, if they think in this audience, think about large companies. The reality of the world is that the people who are actually distributing care at the local level are generally innovators and entrepreneurs. They're small people. They're small businesses out there. They need capital. They need to be sustainable. And if we're not coming up with these solutions that are sustainable, which is what we think about in business, we think about how much do we have to do today for today's patients, but at the same time have a sustainable business model so that we can discover drugs for tomorrow's patients. If we don't think about how to create sustainable models, capital models, where the local entrepreneurs, innovators, and care providers can stay in business, then it's hopeless. So I would just say that that's really important that we remember common goals are important, partnerships are important, but sustainable approaches to capital are also important.
Thank you for that. Peter, what have you, as we search for solutions, as we search for a way to accelerate progress, what have you learned from where you sit with the Global Fund about what works?
Well, it's interesting. I've been in the Global Fund a little over a year, coming from a totally different background, not from the world of global health at all. And a few things have struck me. First is the importance of political leadership. The Prime Minister sort of said it wasn't about politics in the partisan sense, but in the deep sense, health is about politics. Improving the health of the poor and the marginalized means redistribution. Improving the health of the marginalized, the discriminated against, the criminalized, involves political decisions around breaking down those barriers. So political leadership is absolutely critical. A second thing that has really struck me is the importance of the voice of those who are most affected. It is not enough to be doing good health to people. People have to be able to shape the interventions that are happening to them. And that's very much building on what Joanne was saying. I'm not sure we're doing that collectively as well as we should be doing. Certainly with adolescent girls and young women, the Global Fund has funded something called Her Voice, which is designed to enable groups of adolescent girls and young women to play that kind of role. But do I think we do it as well? And is it as pervasive as it needs to be? Probably, probably not. A third thing I think is absolutely important, and I suppose this is the ex kind of business person in me speaking, is to be relentlessly outcomes focused. And not be focusing on input metrics, but be saying, how much difference are we making to the lives of the people we are working with to help? And can we measure that? And can we have the data disaggregated in a way that really helps us understand what's going on with different age groups, different ethnicities, different gender, and so we understand the impact of different interventions. One of my surprises coming into the world of the global health is the data is too old and not disaggregated enough. And we need to get better data. And that's very true around diseases that disproportionately affect people of different age and gender. So, and the last point I would say is, building on Ken's point, is partnership. We are all in all our organizations more comfortable at working in our own particular silos. And yet the nature of the issues we're talking about, when you just sort of hear this conversation, they don't sit neatly within the biomedical arena, within the arena of business, within the arena of education. Actually, we have to work together, and that can mean sort of going outside your comfort zone in the types of things and the types of partnerships you create. And I think we need to be prepared to take some risks in doing that, to be prepared to experiment, and to be prepared to invite people into our decision-making who will disagree with us. And so there's a number of things that both I see as elements of success, but also challenges that we need to overcome if we are to get to the objectives of SDG 3 and beyond.
As a former news anchor, I'm very aware of the time. We have about 8 minutes left. I have 6 of you on the stage. I want to ask each of you, and so you have just about a minute or so, each of you to say and share with us all what gives you hope as you look at the road ahead. What's your one move? What's your power move? How will you use your power when you leave here? Phumzile.
What gives me hope is the extent to which younger people have been mobilized and mobilized themselves into the causes of our time, from gender equality to climate change. That is something to build on strongly and to invest in. We need to invest much more to these movements that are led by young people and in grassroots. And where I am, looking at the 25th anniversary of Beijing, I would like to invest in making it possible for these young people that are still outside the fold to know about these challenges and work with you in this room to recruit them into the fold and to give them the possibility that when we celebrate 25 years of Beijing, the penny will drop with them as well, and they will be part of the march forward, because we need more and more and more people to be part of the struggles. Numbers matter.
Thank you. Minister Monsef, same question to you.
I have lots of hope. I get my hope from a feminist prime minister. I get my hope from Canadians. I get my hope from young people. I get my hope from a movement that has not given up no matter what's been thrown its way and has been able to achieve amazing results in a very short period of time. I get my hope from the fact that we have men and boys and gender diverse peoples and voices we haven't heard, and people with a lot of money saying this is the right thing to do, it is the smart thing to do. I get my hope from the Equality Fund that is creating for the first time a platform for us to come together and not work in silos. Visit equalityfund.ca. How am I going to use my power? I'm going to tell this story of us coming together, the largest gathering of feminists, I believe, in the 21st century so far. I'm going to tell this story again and again and again. And how am I going to use my power? Well, we have an election coming up, so I'm going to work really hard to keep my power.
Good.
I want you on every panel I do, Minister Monsef. Joannie.
I think what gives me hope is to see committed young people in this room and out of this room doing an amazing work, not just to design program, but also implement, be sure that they're involved in accountability, but also in decision making. What makes me hope is also seeing more women in political position and decision-making position, exercising their power and bringing along male allies, because what we are seeing is that young boys and male, they are willing to join our work. There was a recent study on the platform NIVI that is set up by Merck Mother that shows that on the age range of 20-24, young males are more likely to seek for reproductive health information than girls. That was the data from Kenya. So we have this opportunity to bring them together and highlight the fact that masculinity and feminism and gender equality are not mutually exclusive. And I will use my power to powerize. I will use my power to powerize, to share power, to shift paradigm, to shake power, and more importantly, to work with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Winnie?
Yeah, for me, what gives me hope indeed is the young generation. Joannie and her generation. And a lot of them also young boys who've been socialized differently, who take equality as a given. They give me hope. My power and what I'm going to do with it, well, currently in my role as the head of Oxfam, is to push my organization to work more with women's rights organizations and to work differently, to work in a feminist way. Another way I'll share my power, use my power, is of course to do what we do, activists. Speak truth to power, challenge governments, challenge companies to be fair, to be just, and not to trash women and the environment. I'll do that more and more.
Ken, money is power. How are you going to use your power?
So let me start by saying I have a great deal of optimism. I think sometimes when we listen to the media, we only hear the negative things that are happening in the world. A lot of people are being taken out of poverty today. A lot of organizations are working very hard to try to address these issues of women's equality, issues of better health, etc. So I get a lot of optimism by the rationality of some quiet people in the world and their effective work on this area. How will I use my power? I will continue to use my power as long as I have it at Merck to ensure that this company uses its resources thoughtfully in a way that can drive empowerment for women, but also health for everyone. Again, I don't think we can separate the issues of women, for example, from the issues of children. So our goal as a company is to use science to improve the longevity and the quality of life for people all over the world. Not just the people who can afford to pay for our medicines, but people whose lives need to be saved and improved even if they can't afford them.
Peter, you get the final word.
First of all, on hope, well, this occasion, frankly, is a fantastic hope-giving event, full of energy, inspiration, ideas, challenge. So fantastic. Also, hope, Prime Minister Trudeau's commitment today. Government of Canada really stepping up, showing its ability to put money behind words. Fantastic leadership. My use of my power. First, under my leadership, the Global Fund will be a powerful agent determined to break down gender-based inequalities in terms of access to health. And specifically, we will achieve a dramatic reduction in HIV infection rates among adolescent girls and young women. And as a more process point, picking up on a theme that my colleagues on the panel have mentioned, under my leadership at the Global Fund, we will get even better at hearing and engaging the voices, not just of affected communities as a whole, which is very institutionalized within the Global Fund, but specifically of youth and even more specifically of adolescent girls and young women, because I think that's a vital part of us being able to do our jobs properly.
Thank you. And for my part, I just want to say that I draw hope from seeing every single one of you here in this room and being at a gathering like this. I think the key is partnership. It is working together. It is hearing everyone's voice and everyone being included and valued. I want to thank everyone on the panel. Please give them a warm round of applause as you show your appreciation. Thank you, Phumzile, Minister Monsef, Joannie, Winnie, Ken, Peter. Thank you so much, and thank you.
We now welcome to the stage former Prime Minister of New Zealand and Women Deliver board member Helen Clark, who will announce the winner of the Delivering for Girls and Women Award.
Good morning, everybody. We're coming to a very wonderful announcement, and it's a great pleasure for me on behalf of Women Deliver to be presenting today an honour from Women Deliver to a woman who has long been an outstanding leader on sexual and reproductive health and rights. That woman is Dr. Carmen Barroso. So, Carmen, come and stand here while I say just a very few words about your incredible and wonderful career. Early on, Carmen was a researcher with the Chagas Foundation, where she created the first ever gender studies program in Brazil. That was a first. Many of you here will know Carmen for her work as head of the International Planned Parenthood Federation for the Western Hemisphere. Great job there. But way before that, Carmen was also leading as director of the MacArthur Foundation's population program. And from that position, she supported women's organizations around the world and helped to make the landmark Cairo Conference of 1994 adopt a human rights paradigm. Carmen then served in very recent years as co-chair of the UN Secretary General's Independent Accountability Panel for every woman, every child, every adolescent. And that was a natural step in a career promoting gender equality and human rights for all. Carmen tells me that now she is the director of Global Doctors for Choice, and there she continues the good fight for sexual and reproductive health and rights for every human being. So, please now an especially big hand for honouring Dr. Carmen Barroso, recipient of the Women Deliver Award for delivering always for girls and women. Congratulations, Carmen. You can see the beautiful artwork is almost bigger than Carmen, but she's going to come and address you now.
Thank you. What an honor to receive this award from Women Deliver and from Prime Minister Helen Clark. It's a capstone in my long and happy life. I want to dedicate this award to the women who voted for Trump and the women who voted for Bolsonaro in Brazil. I feel so sorry for them. I hope Women Deliver creates new approaches to deliver them from the tragic misconceptions that led them to put their world and our world in such a huge danger. I thank Women Deliver and all the partners who have built a global movement, who made all of us here aware of the importance of gender equality. Let us rise to the occasion now and reach out to those still not here. Let's just do it.
This concludes our plenary session. Ainsi s'achève cette séance plénière.